I can't wait to introduce the people we have presenting today. Straight out of the Bluebell Market Center, we have Matt Harnick and Michelle. Pronounce your last name for me, Michelle.
Shenver.
Genevieve. Okay, wow, that has a very nice ring to it. That's
Thank
perfect.
you.
Yes. And they are here to share their secrets on building a very successful business. I want to let you know that last week in Bluebell, we had the awards, and the Matt Harnick team took third place in closed volume for individual agents. They took second in closed units for individual agents. Importantly, they are 100% referral partner with Safeguard, one of our passive income ventures that all of you should be learning about and implementing in your business, and top honors for GCI. So I am very thrilled that they're going to spend some of their very valuable time with us this morning. We're pretty much unscripted. Matt and I talked a little bit, and I'm sure he shared it with Michelle about what our goal is for today. And that our goal is very simple. It's to let the people on the call know different ways of lead gen and how successful agents are running their business. I said to Matt, we're going to go over scripts. And he gave me the same look that many megas give me, like, oh, I don't use scripts. I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you what I tell everybody every week when I prep them for this call. You do, you just don't know it. And I send him away. And 2 days later, he shows up at my office door. He's, I've been thinking about what you said, and I guess I probably do. I just don't realize it, or I just don't call it scripts. So what we know is that Matt and Michelle have internalized these scripts or dialogues, or they call them something different, but they do have set routines that they're using to win buyers and sellers. So that being said, that's what we're going to discuss today. And this is being recorded too, because I know it's going to be very powerful. So I'm going to start with those questions, guys. What are you doing? How did you get to this point in your business where you got all these awards? And what are you doing to sustain it?
So first of all, thanks for having us, Val. We appreciate it. Michelle and I definitely have talked a lot about, sort of what it is that we do. And, again, in the context of scripting, a lot of us are used to hearing the words or the word script or even dialogues coming out of Bold as an example, where you have a book and there's, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I would like to talk with you today about, and that's a script. For us, the reason that we had some difficulty with, figuring out how we wanted to present today is because we don't do that per se. What we do is we talk about certain things in the same way over and over again, using the same structures, the same sentences, the same concepts, and talk to clients, and sometimes not clients, about how we do things. And as Val put very well, we've internalized these things, and that has become our script or our dialogue, even though it's not something we really thought about until Val really put the assignment to us. So Michelle and I spent some time yesterday, and I kind of walked in all like wide-eyed, like, so how are we going to do this tomorrow? and we talked about it, and we realized that there really are some ways that we have tailored our business to be able to talk to clients about certain things, in their lives and in the decisions that they make, that really have made an impact and it really made a difference to them, and has made it easier for us because over and over again we do talk about things the same way conceptually. So Michelle and I decided to each take sort of like a different approach to how we do that, and also because scripts sometimes don't sound natural when you're going through them, and for me, it's very important for my clients to feel like I'm really engaged in the conversation versus reading something. However, as I said, we've sort of figured out how to navigate all that while sounding natural and being natural and really understanding what we're talking about with clients and getting through it. We also have figured out ways to really, sort of maximize those conversations. There's an agent in our office. Her name's Pam Butera. Some of you may know the name. I've known Pam since I started with KW Bluebell in 2009. And one of the things that always stuck with me, Pam over the years, and Val, you may have seen this, over the years has done a listing presentation, a mock listing presentation where she's faced off against another agent, who's, pretending to be the seller, for example, and Pam will go through her listing presentation. And every time she does this, and if you see that she comes up in the education calendar, be there, because she is a master at it. One of the things I love particularly about Pam's presentation is she has all of her questions right in front of her. She has a list of all the different things she's going to talk to sellers about.
Mm.
And it struck me when I first saw her do this in like 2009 or 2010. Pam is unquestionably one of the top agents in our market area. And here's me as a brand new agent thinking, okay, I have to memorize my listing presentation. I have to figure out, I have to know this stuff cold. I have to internalize it. And then I went to Pam's listing presentation and I'm like, my head exploded. I'm like, she's got a list of all these questions that she's asking her seller right in front of her. And not only does she have it, she acknowledged it a number of different times. Mr. Seller, hang on, let me just make sure I went through all the questions I need to ask you. And I'm sitting there like, are you kidding me? And then it dawned on me. I'm like, of course she does, because this is okay. Like, she made that okay. It is okay for you to be at a listing presentation or be working with a buyer and have a list of what you want to ask them in front of you. I know that sounds absolutely mind-blowing, but think about this for a second. You come up with that list, or Pam probably would easily share hers with you. And how much more prepared would you be if you go into that meeting and you know exactly what you want to ask them? Okay, Mr. Seller, I asked you about this, as she's checking them off. Okay, I didn't ask you about this. Let me ask you about whatever it is. And I'm sitting there like, wow, that's awesome. And that has stuck with me from the very beginning of my real estate career in 2009. So on that note, let me share my screen here real quick before I do. So we broke this down into, can I get a show of hands? You can either raise your hand digitally or just put your hand up. How many of us are newer agents? And by newer, let's say like 2 years or less as an example. Okay, a lot of us.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
Can I assume, or I don't want to assume, but are a lot of you working with buyers at this time? Like maybe you're starting to work with listings, but is buyers like maybe like the larger part of your business? Okay, good. So we kind of wanted to focus on that today, on the buyer side. But again, don't miss Pam Butera if you see that come up. So what Michelle and I have done is we decided, and Michelle and I have been working together for a little over a year now. Michelle started with the Harnick Team in January of 2021. So January 4th was her first anniversary. And we really took the last year to organize and to really put together a lot of systems that could really just help do everything we do. We call me the mad scientist of the team, and Michelle is like the calm, organized ops person. And the two of us.
OCD to a fault,
Yes.
but it's okay. I fully admit it.
Michelle's OCD, I'm ADHD. So the two of us make a really good team. And what we decided to do was to sort of revolutionize for us our buyer presentations and, meeting and working with buyers. So we came up with this concept of putting together this form, basically, that when we first talk with buyers, the first thing we do is we ask them to get pre-approved, and then we send them this link. It's actually in our signatures, and it's a Google form, which basically goes through and asks them to answer a number of different questions so that when we meet with them, we're doing buyer consults, right? We're either meeting them in person or on the phone or by Zoom, maybe more recently. So we have all this information in front of them, and a lot of our buyer consult is just going over the information that they've already filled out just to clarify with them, ask them a lot of questions. We review this in advance. And so we'll show it to you.
And you'll find with this, it gives you a great baseline. I mean, you can talk to them and they can tell you what they're looking for, but until they've really deep dive into our buyer profile, that's when they realize that there's things that they wanted that they didn't even realize that they wanted. So it kind of gives an extra added excitement for them because they're like, oh, they're taking the extra time to really learn what I want.
Right. And again, this is great because it's sort of just going over the information they've already filled out. It really becomes the basis of our buyer consult. So it is a script in a sense. I mean, we're going through their information with them. So this is just, can everyone hopefully see this? Yeah. Okay. So this is our buyer consult. It's a Google form that we have tailored over the years. We'll get into a couple of the things we've added through experience. but this is basically it. There's 6 different sections. We just basically start off by saying that our goal is to work with them to make this a smooth transaction, to dig deep into all their must-haves, all their deal breakers. These are things that we have talked about. I'm sure a lot of us have talked about with our buyers. We're just putting it in writing. So then we just kind of go through. We have our first section with our client information. We ask them to fill out all their personal information. This goes right into our CRM. So it's coming right from them. We're not taking this down on note paper, etc. And by the way, of course, because it's a Google form, we can always review back at it. Notice we have so far 232 responses. We've deleted some over the years because they're not used anymore, or for whatever reason we decided not to work with the client, etc. Their current street address, their city, their state. So let's say, for example, that they say, well, we'll get further into it, but further down in the form, it asks if they have a house to sell. Awesome. Could be a listing that you can get as well as a buy. Here's all their information that we know exactly where they live. We can then call our referral partners from around the country and see who would work to be able to help them. One of the things that we're very keen on in our business is disc profile. So if you notice right here, there's a question just talking about personality style. And right away, they identify with us if they're a DISC or, certainly any combination thereof. We do this for a few different reasons. One, because we know how to talk to them. Two, because as we get further down into the questionnaire or the profile, we also ask them about lenders. One of the things that Michelle and I are find very important is to link up our clients with a lender that has a similar disc profile. We find that that is an extremely important relationship, obviously, because they're not buying a house unless it's cash. They're not buying a house without a lender. Can you imagine if you have a very high expressive lender with a very high SC buyer? It might not exactly fit. The buyer might feel that the lender is rolling right over them, for example. So we really like to make that relationship fit as best we can. And we do have a great pool of lenders. We do work with our in-house lenders as well, great bunch of lenders. And we really like to, we find that those lenders have different personalities and have different strengths. So we do find a way to link up the buyers with the lender that seems to work best with them. And then also, look, if it's a couple, one, like my wife and I'm a DI, she's an SC. So, as the agent, I want to know if I'm talking to people with 2 different personality styles. So that's also important to know. Their preferred method of communication, obviously, that's pretty straightforward. Something that we learned the hard way.
Very hard way.
Go ahead, Michelle, you can jump in.
The very hard way. We had a buyer who I personally felt we were communicating great. I thought that everything was going fine, and I was communicating in the proper amount of time that they felt, and they came back and said that we weren't being communicative enough. They felt like they were being discarded or whatever the case may be. And I said to Matt, I'm kind of taking this personally. I don't ever want someone that we're working with, a client of ours, a potential client of ours, to feel like we don't care. So we said, how can we move on from this? How can we learn from this? Because every, fall back, step back, whatever is a learning moment. You always take it as a teachable moment. So this was a teachable moment for our business. And we went, okay, where could we add kind of a checkpoint to make sure this doesn't happen again? And that's where this question came from. So we decided to learn right from the get-go what their communication style is. Are you okay with our level 3 of once a week communication? Or do you want to be a little more laxed and you'll reach out when you're ready? Or do you need us to reach out every other day, just even if there's no update, saying there's no update? But we want to know ahead of time, and it's right in our CRM system. So as soon as I pull up their contact card, one of the questions that pops up is their communication style. And I know that if I need to contact them every other day, I'm putting a task to email, call, text every other day.
Yep. Yeah, and notice we like to make a little bit of a joke about it, caffeine fueled with a smiley face. But you know what? There are clients that are caffeine fueled, and they're like, hey, we got to buy a house in 60 days. We want to hear from you every single day until we figure this out. Fine. That's a good thing. And we definitely want to know that. So this also, it's not only a script, but it actually helps flavor, if you will, our ongoing scripts with that client. We know exactly where they are in the process. We know how they like to be communicated with. So yeah, so we definitely added this, and it's been really helpful, and they do answer this question.
Yep.
Um,
All right, before you go
yeah,
further, are you using Command? Are you guys using Command?
we were.
Okay.
We're currently not. We're using Brivity. We
Well,
moved.
and the reason that I asked is when Michelle was saying about how the contact card comes up,
Yep.
and I'm like, I don't know.
So in Command, before we switched, I would put it, there's a note section in Command. That's where I would put it and then assign a task from there. In the system we have now, we can actually add an additional field, and I've added the additional field. But in Command, when we were using it, it was in the notes section, and then I was just creating tasks manually from that.
Yeah, and there's by the way, for those of you that have not chosen a CRM yet, Command's great. You know, to get started with, we did use Command. We needed to move on to something that sort of fit our needs as a team a little differently. But yeah, I mean, and you should absolutely be, you know, using a CRM. It's a great way to stay in touch with clients. Um, you know, on that note, when we make client care calls, etc., that's a script. um, you know, during the tornado, or in the aftermath of the tornado in Upper Dublin. I live in Upper Dublin Township. For those of you that weren't on earlier in the call before we got started, we got hit with a tornado on September 1st. I don't know how many times during that, you know, number of months afterwards, and certainly even since then, I still, you know, it's just a quick call. How are you doing? How are you doing is a script, you know, and listening to the answer and responding back to that, that's a script. We don't look at it as a script. It's just caring about other people and our clients, etc. But everything that you do in a regular, you know, sort of, you know, systematic way is a script. And that was something that I learned out of all this, by the way.
I think that's a good way to put it, is that a script, that word can be very polarizing, which I said in the chat, but it's really just a systemized way of talking to people. So it could be a template, it could be just an outline, but there should be some sort of documentation that here are those mandatory questions that you want to ask, and that can be your script. And as simple as that.
Yeah. Any questions so far, by the way, on anything we've brought up? Okay, feel free to jump in if you do. Then we go into their home search, and this just basically talks about the ideal areas they want to focus on, zip codes, and of course, remember, we're taking all the information. Michelle basically just plugs us right into Bright, and that becomes their search. So how easy is that? What's also great about having this, by the way, and of course, remember, once we go to the responses, we have all of their answers. We can always look back at it. So once in a while, we have a client that says, you know what, I don't know why all these homes are coming up in Bucks County. I didn't think we were looking at Bucks County. So, you know, we'll look back and be like, well, you know, that's what you had in your profile. We can always change that, but we have something to fall back to. It's also great because, you know, we can send this to them once in a while and say, hey, here's the criteria we're using. Do any of you have instances where you're setting up a search on Bright and you have clients that are pulling stuff from Zillow or Redfin or any of the other online sites and wanting to go see all these houses, and they're wondering why those aren't coming up in your search from Bright MLS? It's probably because they're using different criteria, because maybe they're not getting enough homes coming through Bright and they are getting frustrated. So they want to start doing their own searching and sending you homes that ultimately are not going to work for them because it doesn't meet their needs. This is the way that you sort of approach that. You can send this back to them and say, hey, listen, here's the criteria we're using. Let's just make sure we're on the same page. And that's a great way to double check and make changes if needed, of course. How important is the school district? You know, any other areas you would consider? Do you have pets? And then also we start getting to things like their timeline. You know, how quickly do you need to buy a home? I mean, if they're caffeine fueled and they need to buy a home between 1 and 3 months, we're on it. That becomes one of our A buyers, talking about, you know, how you rate A, B, and C buyers. That's a priority buyer. That's someone that needs to buy a house really quickly. And we jump on that even more quickly. How many homes have you seen so far? This kind of gives you just, again, a way to talk with them in a script or not about how they're finding homes that they've currently looked at, if they've seen them. Are they driving by open houses? If they're going to open houses, that also opens a dialogue into another script in terms of what happens if you're going to go to an open house. And, you know, this is something that we talk about in our buyer consult. Hey, you can go to open houses. Absolutely. We think you should. We may not necessarily accompany you to that open house. Go through the open house, see if it's something that you're interested in, let us know. By the way, the agent's probably going to ask you to sign in. If you want to, you can sign in. Just make sure you show them our business card so they know we're working together.
Which we
These
usually email to them. That way they have it right on their phone. They can save it. And then when they go to that open house, it's right there. They go, oh, I'm working with the Harnick team. Here's their information.
right. And if they're not sure who we are yet, because we haven't really spoken much, then they hold up their phone and show the business card. Here's my agent. Yeah. It also kind of opens us into a couple of other dialogues, which we get into further below, which we'll get into. Have they identified any homes they want to see, where the address is? Again, we can pull up those addresses and take a look and just kind of get a sense of what their style might be. Are they interested in new home? If they check off new construction or both, then we get into another script with them about what happens if they go to a new construction site and they happen to meet with the site agent and they didn't mention that they were working with an agent. Chances are we're probably cut out of the process, and the buyers, they don't want that. They want someone who can work with them, represent their interests, etc. So these are just all different ways of opening different conversations into the lives and the minds of our buyers. Financials, we talk about their price range. Here's where we get into, have you arranged financing yet? If it's a no, then or not yet, then this is a chance for us to refer a lender. Do you have a pre-approval? Up to what amount are you pre-approved to? What kind of financing? And again, here's something else we can get into with them in terms of the different types of loans. We talk with them, obviously as agents, we talk with our buyers about loans, but of course, this is something we do like to mention. Hey, listen, we'll get into this with you once you have your lender picked, and once we recommend your lender and you can pair up with your lender, they'll really get into this with you. We don't obviously want to be loan experts. We want to know enough to be able to help guide them, but then we pass them off to our lender. Monthly mortgage amount. This is a great way of finding out not only what their budget is. Obviously, we've just reached that in one of our previous questions here, but also to figure out, if they want to buy a $600,000 house and they're comfortable paying $1,500 a month in mortgage, there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Again, it's another opportunity for us to be able to talk with them. And maybe it opens another conversation. Hey, we're only going to get a mortgage for $100,000 and the rest of it's going to be cash. Great. That's something good to know. The fun part. So then we start talking about stylistically the homes they're looking for. And again, this is all just taken right from Bright MLS. So we have different ways of sort of setting up their search. Notice we're using the words primary bathroom, primary bedroom, because that's currently the adopted language that we're supposed to be using.
And some buyers won't know what that means, so you might have to explain it. We found that a couple times when we first switched the language. So once you explain it, they get it.
Yep. Talking about things like basements and garages, that's important. Ideal number of floors, age range, condition. This is in particularly a really good one. This is a great way of finding out if your buyers are thinking that they really, want to do tearing down walls and they're ready to put in some sweat equity, and then they get into houses. Everybody's a flipper, and everybody watches HGTV and they're ready to just rip apart a house. It's a little different story when you have to live there too, in some cases. So this is also a really good way to sort of, test where your buyers are in terms of that process. Again, are you looking for a fixer up, or just kind of combines with that question? Is central air conditioning important to you? Well, if you live in this area during the summer, it may really very well be important to you. So that's something we'd like to know. Size yard. Sometimes they don't necessarily know about acreage. They know they want a nice sized yard, but they don't really know what that looks like. So again, if you get them out to houses and they start determining that a certain amount of yard is just not big enough for them, then that you'll know. Is it fenced? Does that matter? We'll know that. Same thing with a pool. Sometimes they don't really understand about public water and sewer, so we can sort of get into another dialogue, another script with them about public water versus septic. I'm sorry, public water versus well water, sewer versus septic, etc. And then different specific features about the neighborhood. And again, this is a chance for us to also get into yet another dialogue with them about just what they're looking for. Remember to also kind of dig deeper. Like sometimes they'll answer questions, oh, we're looking for a neighborhood close to a school. Cool. What kind of, what age are your children? What kind of school are we looking for? Are we talking about a university? Are we talking about a, grade school, etc.? Short sales and foreclosures. So I find that initially, some of our clients really know about foreclosures and short sales, and they really, definitely want to get on that train. And some of them don't know anything about it. The way we talk about it, and again, thanks, Val, because I never really looked at this in terms of scripts and dialogues, but we have a really big conversation surrounding this too. When they ask us about short sales, yeah, we'd like to get into short sales. We're hearing a lot about it. Great. And then we go back to the portion of our profile which talks about when they need to move in. If they need to be into a house in between 1 and 3 months and they're interested in short sales, probably not a good fit. Could be, probably not. So we have that conversation since short sales can really take, sometimes an inordinate amount of time to get closed. Foreclosures. Well, if they, some foreclosures may be in great shape, some may not be. And if it's been foreclosed for a while, and if the bank owns it and there's no seller's disclosure, so we may not know what the condition of the house is. So that's something, again, another conversation to have with your buyers, another dialogue. It would be best if I could move by X date. Again, this kind of feeds into that same, I need to be somewhere between 1 and 3 months. So it's another way to kind of key in on that with them. We need to know if they already own a home. This is, again, opens another dialogue into being able to figure out if this is also going to become a listing as well. Can we help you selling your current home? And we also make it known, of course, that even if their current home is not in Pennsylvania, in Philly Metro, where we're licensed, we're happy to refer you to an agent who is. And then, of course, anything else we should know. I mean, there may be just a long catch-all here, and just in terms of things they haven't told us. Very often, this tells us, a lot. So we really also look at that answer. And that's it. And then, we just basically take all that information, we distill it. This again is just the basis of that dialogue with the client, but it's a really good way to just open up a lot of different avenues. As you're reading these questions, you may realize that there was something they said previously. They said, you know what, now that I'm reading this question, I'm realizing you said something before, which I want to go back to. And so kind of like Pam Butera has a list of everything she goes through in her listing presentation, this is our buyer presentation.
Someone asked about if we sign a buyer agency agreement. That's my area of expertise. So I don't technically have scripts per se, but I have templated emails that I use that goes out to all our buyers. So as soon as Matt intakes a lead, or if I intake a lead, our first thing is to get their basic information, phone, name, email. From that, I send out a templated email. In that email, it introduces us, has a copy of our bio, and kind of what we set as our standard before we go out on any appointments. Us as a team have certain things that we like in hand before we step outside and into a home, just to make sure that we've got good quality leads and buyers. So we always make sure that they have their pre-approval. That's super important for us. Even if they are talking with another lender, we want to make sure we have that in hand so that we know that they're qualified for what the search is that I'm going to be setting up. I urge and kind of nudge for them to fill out certain documents before we go out. That way, you guys as agents want to be protected. You don't want to show 15 homes to someone who's not under contract with you. So I word it and phrase it in a way, and again, I can send kind of a copy of what that looks like as well, that just says, hey, here's a team. We ask that you fill a couple of these out. Over the last year that we've implemented this, I have not had one single buyer kick back for wanting to sign documents before they go in a house. I think it gives them a lot of confidence because they know that we are now working for them. We are trying to make sure that they get what they're out to get, which is a home, and we're on their side. So as long as you're upfront and you've got those conversations ahead of time, it gives a lot more confidence in you as an agent, you as a team, and then the buyers are more confident because you've got this extra layer of protection.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be afraid to ask for that ahead of time. I promise there won't be kickback. If anything, they'll ask, well, why is that important that I sign that? And that can open your script for the importance of a buyer agency contract.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the buyer agency contract. We have two sets of paperwork. So as soon as we start working with a buyer, Michelle sends the initial set of paperwork, which is all of the back office disclosures, consumer notice, buyer agency contract, everything that is not property specific. And again, Michelle's script, and I use this sometimes as well when I'm asked, it's like, hey, we're going to be seeing properties in the evenings, on the weekends. There could be a mad rush, especially in this market, to get an offer in. We want to reduce your stress as much as we possibly can. So we're going to get all of this stuff out of the way before we've even identified a house. That way, when we find the house, we're filling out just the property specific documents, that handful of 5 or 6 documents. And like Michelle said, we have not had a single a single client kick back to us. And we sold a lot of homes last year. So don't be afraid to have those conversations. And again, the way you're phrasing it, your dialogue is, we're reducing your stress. This is why we do this.
Yeah, a lot of them were, most of them were like, oh, I've never heard of doing it this way. It was 100% what Matt said. We're like, we know this process is stressful. You're asked to give a lot of information to a lot of different players. And if we can reduce one single stress moment of, once you find that perfect 10, I need to have this house, you don't want to be signing 15 documents. If we can cut that in half and you only have to go over a select few at the end, it is such a relief to them that they're like, oh, all this other stuff is done. We can just focus on the offer.
Yep. And then Michelle also has, not just with the documents, but Michelle has like scripted, emails, so to speak, that go out, regularly throughout the entire process, not just to the client, but also the co-op agent. How much does it reduce the co-op's stress if we're working with another team, another agent, and we've got everything under control from word go? There's, here's who everyone is, here's what we do, here's who we are, here's our title company, here's our conveyancer, here's the lender's information, etc. I mean, when I get emails like that, or when Michelle and I get emails like that, it's like, oh man, this person's really on top of it. This is going to be easy. And right from the get-go, it's like the stress melts away. And, this is stressful enough without adding to it. So that helps us reduce it.
Right. And let's be honest. I mean, if you've got a co-op agent who is a pleasure to work with, it only helps being at that settlement table so much. It's so nice to sit across from them because you've worked so hard and you've each done your due diligence, that it's just a happy moment. There's not that kind of combativeness that can come from a co-op agent who might not always be on top of their stuff. And we've had our fair share of those as well.
Yeah, and imagine the dialogue you can get into with a co-op agent talking about, hey, have you thought about joining Keller Williams, or meet with my team leader? Yeah. So for the team leaders on the call, I mean, certainly, again, it's just another way to solidify that relationship with co-op agents, and that's always helpful, regardless of what ends up coming of it.
There is a question from Allison about handling commission. How do you handle commission? Do you include and discuss on your buyer agency agreement in case a listing only provides 1% or something very low? I'll let Matt answer that because I'm not licensed yet, so I don't speak on commissions.
It doesn't really come up that often. I mean, everyone, without talking about numbers, because we're not really supposed to do that. I'd say set your minimum bar. And the way that we handle it is, if it doesn't meet that, then we talk with our buyers about adding it as a term in the agreement of sale. And that's it. I mean, that's really how we handle it, that simply. If it's not X, then we'll put it in the agreement of sale that the seller needs to come up with a difference. And that's typically how we handle it. I can't say we've hardly ever had that conversation, which is a good thing, but that's how we would handle it, and when it has.
And this has just been amazing. I know the timing is perfect because I'm working with some agents right now that needed to tune up their buyer agency presentation. And this is great. And it's obvious the care that you give to your clients in getting everything that they need on a list is there. It would be a pleasure if I were a client looking for a real estate agent to sell me a home. I would be looking at you guys and I would feel 100% comfortable. And I'm sure many people on this call do.